I would like to warmly welcome you all to our national online event, The Power of Connection. For those of you who haven't seen my face before, my name is Danny McNeil, and I'm very proud to be the East Coast General Manager for EdConnect Australia. I'll commence today with our Acknowledgement of Country. In the spirit of reconciliation, EdConnect Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. Today, I am hosting this event on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to acknowledge them as traditional owners. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. This event we're very excited to host today will showcase the true power of connection and the importance of maintaining relationships in the current COVID-19 times. Across the country, we have experienced lockdowns at different times and for different durations. Each lockdown is hard, challenging, and draws on our resilience. What has become clearly evident in each lockdown is the importance of connection, knowing we are supported, and the belief we will emerge through drawing on both our own strengths and the strengths of others. Today, we'll introduce three of our inspiring volunteers, each a hero in our eyes. They will share fresh, unique and powerful stories. But firstly, I'd like to introduce our CEO, Jerry Clay, who's going to share our plans for 2021 and some of the exciting projects we have in the works. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks, Danny, and thank you for your warm welcome, not just to me, but to everyone who's able to join us today. We keep hearing ping, ping, ping as more and more people join us. It's just lovely. So reflecting on this topsy-turvy world that continues to keep us on our toes, navigating closures, reopening of schools, will volunteers be welcome back, and all the variations between. That's what this last year's been like. We've had more opportunity to engage with our volunteers, and what's been learnt will form part of a new volunteer retention strategy we'll be implementing this year. Now, you will have heard a lot and likely experienced yourself the impact of the pandemic upon volunteering. And I wanted to reflect on some research that's out there. The Australian National University, in their Centre for Social Research and Methods, worked with Volunteering Australia to understand the impact of COVID-19 on volunteering. The proportion of adult Australians undertaking volunteering has fallen very substantially since the pandemic began. It's across all age groups. Many of those who've previously volunteered actually stopped and didn't return. In April this year, 24% of Australians had done voluntary work in the previous 12 months. Now that sounds okay, but that's actually down from 36% in late 2019. An estimated 2.3 million less Australians volunteered in the 12 months prior to April this year. And that was both males and females, though slightly larger decline in the female population. So those who actually stopped volunteering, what we know about that is that they had a greater loss of life satisfaction than those who continued to volunteer, and were more likely, or far more likely, to say that they felt lonely at least some of the time. So it's pretty loud and clear, volunteering is important to connection, health and well-being. So we're going to share screen again and take a look at EdConnect's impact in 2020. We had more students who were mentored, which was excellent, over the 1,000 mark, though the actual numbers of volunteers participating in learning support did decrease slightly. Either way, there was a massive amount of connection happening between volunteers and students. The overall impact, for every dollar spent on the program, we returned $2.30 to the Australian community. That's compared to $3.43 the year before. Because although our volunteer numbers were reasonably stable, the number of weeks that we're able to actually volunteer in schools was literally halved, reducing the value returned to community to 1.6 million, whereas it had just passed the magic 4 million mark in 2019. Interestingly, volunteer numbers only slightly decreased, And having just reached the halfway mark for 2021, we've received 500 new applications this year. There's no doubt recruitment is strong. Now, what do our volunteers tell us? So volunteering does improve health and well-being. That's the highest indicator at 86%. More volunteers feel connected to community. It helped to develop some new skills, and it does have an impact on that physical health and well-being. Schools tell us the main benefits they receive are being able to offer one-to-one assistance to those who need it most and having a positive role model for children to interact with. So now we come to student impact, which is the most critical aspect of the program. You can see less disruption in behaviour, positive measures around social skills, increased participation in school activities, definite improvements in both self-esteem and concentration, and those all-important relationships with students and the school, rated really highly. And of course, literacy and numeracy, very important measures for us, and the program has positively impacted them both. So great results that they are. These would not be possible without the support we receive from our many funders and sponsors. And we're so grateful to each of them. And in that I include government, philanthropic foundations, sponsors, corporates, donors, and those who offer us in-kind support. It really is just phenomenal. We're very humbled and genuinely grateful to those who are the financial backbone of this amazing organisation. So we're going to stop sharing now, back to my face. Thanks, Danny. So we have done well in these challenging times and are predicting a bumper year for EdConnect. There are many new initiatives, and I'll just run through a few of these. We'll be piloting a virtual volunteering model in primary and secondary schools in Term 3, initially offering mentoring to students. There's a transitioning mentor program that will be supporting students moving from primary to high school. That'll be piloted in Geelong. A Girls in STEM program will be offered in Melbourne and includes expanding the program for the first time into the Southeast Corridor, which is very exciting for us. Then there's the evaluating the program's overall impact. It really is essential, and we'll be reviewing the methodology and tools that we currently use in conjunction with Curtin University. For all our volunteers, there'll be more training opportunities, meeting locally with other volunteers, sharing experiences, friendships and support. And just to finish, I want to share my current favourite quote about the experience of volunteering. I think of my personal rewards from volunteering as cosmic electricity with no off button. The good feeling sticks with me throughout the week, if not the month. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. It was so great to hear what's going on, and even for staff, just a reminder of everything that's going on and the impact that we're having. So thank you very much. Before we get to our guest speakers, I'd really like everyone to participate in something very quick. If everyone could make a small heart with their two hands. Hopefully I've got it right. If you're not feeling comfortable, because we're going to take a screenshot of this to be able to use as thanks and other little tokens of appreciation. So if everyone can make the heart sign with their hands and probably nice and close and a nice big smile. And Rachel's going to take a screenshot. So 1, 2, 3. Excellent. I've got the thumbs up from Rachel. So that's all great. Just a reminder to everyone that we are staying on mute for today's session, and I strongly encourage you to hop on speaker mode so that the person who's speaking is the biggest picture on your screen. That will just help you get the most out of today. We want today to be really interactive for you, the best way I guess we can in this situation. And so if you've got any questions for our guest speakers, as you think of them and as they're speaking, please place them in the chat box. And so some of our team are going to be looking through that, and they will then review and help us ask those questions of our guest speakers at the end. I can imagine we're probably not going to get to all of them. So there's some that we might ask offline and then return back to the group and let them know what the responses are. Okay, so now we can get to our guest speakers. Next, I'd like to cross to our guest speaker, Graham Maybury, who'll be speaking on the importance of connection when heading towards retirement. Graeme recently released a podcast which shone a light on the ageing journey. In the podcast, he discusses what really matters when it comes to growing older. Each episode explored a range of topics around the emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial aspects of ageing, with experts, seniors, and their families contributing advice, personal experiences, and thought-provoking commentary. I'd like to welcome Graeme.
On and start mute. So yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome. Thank you to everyone who's joined us and the privilege to talk to you once again. It's nice to be invited somewhere. It's always nicer to be invited back. And so thank you for that. And it's a privilege to be your patron, do what I can to help the community understanding of what the excellent work you're doing. And so thank you again for that as well. The topic for me was, as you can hear, was slanted towards seniors, but looking at the lovely faces before me, lots of them aren't, which is excellent. And I've tried to make this something that applies intergenerationally, whatever your age. And so let me launch into this because I only have a limited time. Nightline, doing the evening talkback program for any interstate people. I was on what was the Fairfax network in this state now, the Channel 9 network, for 33 years on talk radio. And it was nighttime, 8 to midnight. And it ran me head on into the reality of social isolation. I'm delighted to say I had a very broad audience. But most people think the people who listen to nightlight radio are all socially isolated. Of course, they're not, but some are. And so I made some naive attempts early on to try and link up. I thought, well, you get a list of people who are more socially isolated than they want to be, and a list of people who want to help with that, just put them together. And I blush now, it was so naive. But then we eventually ended up with some funding for research. And we discovered back then what has been proven by every bit of research since. If you're socially isolated, it impacts your health severely, obviously your mental health, but it impacts things like obesity, blood pressure, diabetes, and so on. But there's another factor in this, and that I also learned through Nightline, which doing the radio program reinforced what my wife and I first learned when we spent 7 years working with homeless young people. Back in the day, in the 70s, back in the day when most Australians didn't believe homeless young people existed. And that is that for people on the margins, life is completely transient, utterly transient. On the fringes, you have very little continuous contact with anyone. And those you do are people in a paid role. It's their paid role to give contact. So as volunteers for this fantastic team, you're giving a priceless gift. You're giving time to these children and you're giving consistency. I know that schools value, ever since the former Governor General Michael Jeffrey, God bless him, recruited me for this. I know schools that I contact have contact with value the consistency of your volunteering. You may be the first adult that just kept on turning up for these children. And I say it's a gift because you volunteer. So the child comes to know you're not paid to be there, like so many others in their life may be. Your presence says to that child, this is what you are worth. I want to talk too briefly about the power of intergenerational connection. The other day, not the other day, but about 8-9 months ago, I woke up with a start, alarmed to see 15 missed calls from my son in America. Our twin boys live in America with their wives and sadly all our grandchildren. But I thought, oh my goodness, what's gone wrong? And just as I was about to kind of clear my head, the phone rang again. So of course I answered it. It was a FaceTime, should I say. And there was our youngest grandchild, about 2.5 at the time. And he had realised that if he kept pressing this particular button, eventually Nana and Poppy would suddenly appear. So you know what they say, if you can't get your technology to work, ask a 2-year-old. Well, 2-year-olds may be better than us at working technology. But that's not true of life. When it comes to fulfilling the potential of young lives, the choice between a grandparent or another, a caring adult, let's say, and microchipped motherboards, there's no contest. And what I love about EdConnect is that you harness the unique power of intergenerational connection. There's a wonderful program that runs overseas, linking the generations, somewhat like ours, though not based around school. Betty Woodward is one of their volunteers, and she talks about a 6 and an 8-year-old that negotiated with their mother and her to help her husband, Betty's husband, rake leaves, or that's what they called it. What they really wanted to do was get rides in the wheelbarrow, wait till there was a big mound of leaves, and then jump into it and spread them all out again. But then she says, best of all, they could tell him whatever was on their minds. It was the idea, and I'm quoting, it was the idea of undivided attention from an older person that they really enjoyed. That's the gift you give, the undivided attention of an older person who's not being paid to be there. And I want to conclude my time with something that I say, if I can, to almost every human resources group to which I've spoken, police, nurses, teachers, anyone in our neck of the woods, community workers. Obviously, those who stay connected through volunteering have all the positive benefits that Jerry's already mentioned. Sorry, Jerry has already mentioned. But there's a more important point. I have a Sicilian friend. Sorry, he's a Calabrese. He would not forgive me. A Calabrese friend. And apparently Calabria has a saying, the man with mozzarella in his moustache thinks the whole world stinks. And we all have mozzarella days when the world's, especially during lockdown. But what happens when you're having a mozzarella life, when you're getting more and more cynical about everything? And I go to Viktor Frankl and a magnificent book, The Search for Meaning, that he wrote in the concentration camps of the Holocaust. It's a long story I don't have time to tell you. But observing the people that were in the Holocaust with him, how some of the apparently weaker lived, but the apparently stronger died. He made many telling observations, and that gave us the book, The Search for Meaning. But the one that always hammers home to me is this. He said, I noted that if there was a purpose, anything could be tolerated. But when there was no purpose, even the slightest frustration became unbearable. And I congratulate you on finding purpose in what we're doing in EdConnect, but encourage you to keep revising that purpose in every area of life. Merle and I were married 50 years last year, but I want a 50-year marriage, not 1 year 50 times over. I want to know what my purpose is in our journey together. What's my purpose as a pastor at the church I'm at? What's my purpose as a community, in a community of 5 here, gated community that I'm in? What is the purpose? Because if I keep my eye on the purpose, anything can be tolerated. Lose purpose, even the slightest frustration becomes unbearable. So thank you very much. I trust that's encouraging, and if nothing else, it's given me the chance to honour you for the work you do. Thanks.
Graeme, thank you. It is always a pleasure to hear you speak and what you have to share, and that, I guess, I can only concur with what you've said, that our volunteers, they sometimes say to us that they get more out of the experience than the students do, which I don't think is correct. I think it's on par, but I think being recognised, appreciated, and knowing that they do have, like, they make a massive difference, and bringing it back to that purpose is so important. And we can see that our organisation is strongly regarded by you, which is amazing, and we're very thankful for that. So thank you for your time today, Graeme. And just a reminder to everyone that if you've got a question for Graeme or for any of our speakers today, please place it in the chat function, and then we can get to it at the end, and we'll invite our speakers back at the end, hop off mute and ask some questions from the group who's with us today. So thank you very much, Graeme. So now we're going to go to our next speaker or speakers, and they are corporate volunteers, Brent and Graeme. Yes, we've got another Graeme who's joining us today, which is fantastic. This dynamic duo come to EdConnect through their affiliation with the Roy Hill Community Foundation. As part of the program, they volunteered their experience at Darling Range Sports College in Western Australia to a group of boys needing help and guidance through their teenage years. I'm just now going to go to a short video where we've captured some of the discussion that we've had with Brenton Graham. And also we do have some native wildlife joining us for that session. So just bear with me as we go to share this video.
My name is Brent. We became part of the foundation through EdConnect and the affiliation that Roy Hill has with EdConnect, and then as part of that program we volunteered our services and have been part of it for a couple of years now.
My name's Graeme, and it was, like Brent said, through the EdConnect program. A couple of years ago I came back to Perth and had a little bit of spare time on my hands, and it was, what could I do with that spare time? And at a function with Roy Hill, we saw the EdConnect banner and went down the path, and here we are, Darling Range Secondary College.
So the program, I suppose, what makes it special for them is probably similar to us. They get a different connection point. It's that we see them once a week, and we try and keep them invigorated by doing different activities. So for us, it's when we have that initial touch point, when they walk up, they look you in the eye now, they shake hands, they're positive, they have valuable conversations, as opposed to, yeah, how you going, and really shallow answers. Now we get really deep conversations out of them and understand who they are as people.
Yeah, it really is, seeing these guys who, when we first meet them, aren't as approachable or are a little bit reserved, probably a bit like ourselves. Getting used to the program and getting into how to communicate, how to deal with these guys, be it kicking the football, cooking something, cleaning up the school. We just start to work through, break down those barriers, and then we start having just very easy general conversations that bring things out, and yeah, you just work through with them and enjoy the time, and I think they do as well. But it's actually nice to come and have that hour outside work, and if you're contributing and helping them out at the same time and building a relationship and contributing here, it takes you outside your normal work environment, takes you outside your normal comfort zones.
Puts life into perspective as
Yeah,
well.
very much so.
We are pretty fortunate, and we work in a fantastic industry, and then you come to Darling Ranges, and to be able to give something back is also valuable for us.
So now I'd like to welcome Brenton Graham to join us, and hop off mute if you're on mute at the moment. So thanks, guys. I also had the pleasure of getting to meet you yesterday, and sorry, I've got other things going on, so apologies for that. So yeah, I guess wanted to kick off and just ask about reflecting back, and you have spoken about it a bit in the clip there, but looking over the time that you've been mentoring this group of young men, what growth have you seen in that group, or any highlights that you can pick out? You there? Oh, have we lost? Oh, Graeme and Brent, I can't hear you. Not sure if anyone else can hear you. No, I'm getting the shakes of heads. Or technical issues. And they've given me the one moment. Yesterday when I did meet with Graeme and Brent, and I think, have you just got some sound back now?
How's that going now, Danny?
Yes, yeah.
It's a technical one out of the two of us. Don't start. It's too early.
And I can just imagine there's quite a bit of banter going back and forth between them right now, after getting to meet them yesterday with some of those technical hitches. So just recapping that question, what, if you think back about the period of time that you've been mentoring this group of young young men as they're progressing through school. What growth have you seen, or what would you like to highlight?
Yeah, as we discussed yesterday, we've been very fortunate to be part of the program, first of all, but having the opportunity to watch at first one boy, and then we joined forces together. So we had two young lads between us, and now on any given week we can have sort of up to 8 boys join us. Watching the lads transition from really shy, reserved, wouldn't have a conversation with anyone, let alone two strange men who turn up to a school, to the point now where we had one of the lads was removed from the program for a period of time, but to watch him come back after a few months and to see that his interpersonal skills had not diminished, and he walked up to us with the same confidence 3 months later, shook our hands, looked us in the eye, asked us how we'd been, which we would never have got previously. For me, that was a moment where you really understood that the impact that we have on these kids is actually really positive. And that sort of goes across all the boys as well. As they get more comfortable talking to us, their friendship grows, and then all of a sudden we find out more in-depth information about how their families are, how their holidays are going, what they're doing for a weekend, and we just get more in-depth conversation, it's tenfold from where we began.
That's amazing. Graeme, what's been the biggest growth that you've seen, or anything that you'd like to add?
I guess it's again, echoing Brent's comments, when we had the one-on-one time, which was great and it had its own purpose, but as you said, joined forces and we've worked together on it, it's certainly changed the dynamic of the group and opened it up to probably you get to see the guys develop and grow. And you've also got to see them hold each other to account. You can actually see them starting to put some values in amongst themselves, not just, are we having that influence? Who knows? But amongst themselves, you can see them making choices and having discussions about, for an example, and we talked about it yesterday, we had, they now will discuss whether or not they're going to miss a class to join the program, or hang on, that class is important, so we're going to do that class and we'll see you next week. Whereas when we first started this program 2 years ago with most of these guys, and there's a couple that are probably a bit newer, that conversation we never had. It was always, we'll just come to the program because we don't have to go to class. And so that's been a great development to watch and see them change that mindset, hold each other to account without being pushed into it. It's just something that's grown. And to see it, it's just quite rewarding actually. And to see them take that responsibility on, which is something I don't think I would have seen out of a couple of them 24 months ago.
Yeah, and I think you guys just commented like we're not sure if we had much to do with it. I think you've had a lot to do with that. You've created that space for these young men to feel supported. And I think drawing back on what Graeme said, that the reliability and the commitment that gives them that role model, but stability that that you're there for them. You guys mentioned something yesterday that one of the office staff said to you. Do you want to share that?
Oh, that was around that we still turn up.
Yeah.
I think it's been about 2.5 years. Brent was there a couple of months earlier than myself. I was a slow uptake. Brent was off the mark a bit quicker. And thanks to Julie, who introduced us from EdConnect over here, who helped us through that process, which was really cool. But yeah, so it's probably 2.5 years, or
It's been going a while.
But it's a normal for us now on a Friday that's what we do. We make sure the time's there, it's put in our diaries, and we go and spend that time with them. And the comment from the lady at the front desk who sees us sign in, it was like, oh yeah, you don't realise that impact you're having, because for us it's something we do now and we enjoy, and we get to give back. And then to have someone make that comment really then starts to resonate that actually you are actually making a difference.
Making a huge difference. And I guess, as Graeme said, that reliability and someone for the students, that it's amazing, and what all our volunteers do, and it really is highlighted by those comments. We saw in the clip that you do a fair bit of cooking. Can you just, how did that all take place, and how does that fit into your mentoring that you do?
So we have a bit of a structure in the way that we sort of get together with the lads. Before we get the reward, we have to do the hard work. And the hard work consists of not being withdrawn from classes. We also do, once a month, we have to clean up the schoolyard. So we bring in big garbage bags. We've got gloves for the boys, and then we basically just walk the whole schoolyard. And unfortunately, the demographic where the school sits, it's a low socio-demographic area, so there's a lot of rubbish everywhere. And that's our way of teaching the boys how to respect their environment. But what we do as I suppose as a positive of the guys doing that work is that we then cook. And then that all came about with Graeme and I normally volunteer on a Friday afternoon just before the guys go to lunch. And conversation was had, what do you got for lunch today? And unfortunately, some of them on a particular day would say, I don't have lunch, which sort of just removes your whole soul when you're looking at a 13 or a 14-year-old boy and they say, we've got no lunch. And unfortunately, we can't give them anything from a monetary perspective or buy their lunch for them. But what we did is we just challenged the system. We got a little bit creative and we decided we would give them a life lesson. And we basically, I can't really say we teach them how to cook. We just throw stuff together and it becomes a work of art. It could be pizza, burgers, a sausage sizzle. It's really pretty small, but it's the thought.
And I think they get a lot out of that cooking. Once a month thereabouts, we cook. And it brings them. They don't sort of generally miss the cooking weeks.
Yeah, they don't miss those weeks.
But again, it's you have a conversation over a sandwich or a hamburger or a pizza, or whatever it happens to be. The conversation flows quite easily. And then that conversation will be about school, be about work, be about sport, be about whatever their interests are. And they're not concentrating on just a one-on-one. They're doing something, and then the conversation flows. And then they
let their guard down a lot more. So they're definitely a lot more open. We spoke to Danny yesterday about how they now have the willingness to dob each other in if they do the wrong thing. So they're becoming quite open with us in regards to who's behaving, who's not behaving. And some weeks we get there'll be two of us and we'll have one student, and then next week we got 8 and there's a new kid joining, and it's just morphed into we're going to take over the school, I think.
Well, you're doing amazing work, and the life skills that you are teaching these young men, the support, being role models, being consistent, is amazing, and we applaud you and all our volunteers. But thank you. It has been a real pleasure to get to know you both very briefly, but I can see with the banter and I guess the discussions that happen in between your cooking or picking up rubbish, they're so vital and important, and you guys play a very important role in these young men's lives, and I think you have guided them, or will continue to guide them and be people that they remember forever. So thank you so much, Brenton Graham. Really appreciate it, and reminder to everyone, if you've got any questions for them, please place them in the chat box because we can get to it hopefully at the end. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Danny.
Cheers. Thank you.
Now our next guest speaker is a superstar principal and a school coordinator, and she's currently on maternity leave, Blanche and Reno. I have had the absolute pleasure of getting to know Blanche a little bit better through the Give Where You Live Pitch Up initiative, and her passion for students' wellbeing and welfare together with her support of EdConnect volunteers in her school and our program overall, is truly inspiring, and we appreciate it so much. We're going to share with you now her speech that she gave as our advocate at the Pitch Up event.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Blanche and Reno. I'm the principal at Newcombe Park Primary School, and I was previously at Drysdale Primary School, where I began my connection with EdConnect in 2017. I'm a local school principal who has a significant passion for the wellbeing and additional support options for my students. This drive is influenced by the struggles of my two brothers. One is highly intelligent but always struggled socially, while the other has ADHD and is on a disability pension at 33. When the local EdConnect liaison officer, like Sally, came to Drysdale Primary School in 2017 to offer mentors and learning support, I was absolutely thrilled. I was working in a school of 600 students with approximately 200 on my radar as either needing academic or social and emotional support. Being a local, she knew our context and community and was able to help me pair volunteers with student needs. I had a Year 6 boy who was instantly connected with a local man who became his consistent friend, something that he hadn't had for some time. I had a Year 3 student who struggled to stay on task, who now had additional support each week for a double session of literacy. I also had a Year 5 student with a traumatic background who disclosed some incidents to her mentor as she had become a trusted person in her world. Without EdConnect, I truly believe the lives of so many children would be worse off than they are today.
Thanks, Blanche, for coming along today. And also thank you for sharing your own personal connection, I guess, with your passion for the space that we work in. But you also mentioned in that clip that a third of your students at a previous school were on your radar for emotional and academic support. Would this be common, like this common sort of percentage numbers for most schools, would you think?
Thanks, Danny. I would say yes, it is quite common for a school to have that number of students needing some sort of support. Obviously, there's a whole range of influences on that, including, demographic, whether the school is known to provide support. That can mean more students will come to that school who may have needs. Obviously, local incidents, if there's things that are happening in that local community. There's a whole range of factors that influence how many students need that support. But I guess if you break it down, first of all, there's that emotional support that can be dependent on the time. So things like family breakdowns, job loss in the family, addiction, moving house, relationships in the family. So those things that can happen at various times. And that's similar in terms of Year 6 students preparing for transition as well. Then there's that group of students emotionally that might be naturally have tendencies towards anxiety and things like that. So that's a whole nother group that, may be on your radar. And then academically, there's a whole range as well. So there's, a small group who are funded for a disability and they receive funding from the department as part of that. But then there's another group that may just struggle academically for all sorts of reasons and not be at level, but not necessarily meet a criteria for particular support. And then there's also those gifted students. As I mentioned, my brother was highly intelligent, but still he would have really benefited from having someone to support him in how to manage that. So there's a whole range, and I would say, the school that I was discussing did have some socioeconomic influences that meant there was a large group that had sort of family situations that meant they needed extra support. But I think if you looked at any school and looked at the students carefully, there would be a lot more than people expect, when you actually break down all of those different areas that may mean students need support. And I think for me, that was one of the reasons I was so excited about EdConnect. It's one of the few opportunities for, as a principal, for me to allocate support that didn't require criteria. So for students to get funding from the department, and for a lot of other programs, there's very strict criteria that a lot of our kids just don't meet the need. So for me to be able to pick those students that I knew were, I shouldn't say falling through the gaps, but weren't going to be picked up by those other systems that could then have a one-on-one support. It's a very unique program, and I think for schools that's a huge benefit, that we get that flexibility of knowing those students and being able to pair them with a mentor.
Yeah, thanks, Blanche. And schools, your students best, and what disengaging from education is so many different things. So it's so, I guess, great to hear from you, but also you're just reaffirming that the students who need the support are selected. And I guess we'd love to have so many more volunteers for each school, and that's what we're working to do. But that there's just so much support needed just to help students that just otherwise wouldn't get it. Blanche, I wanted to pick your brains for a moment, and one of the questions I get asked when we do training is what happens if in a session, whether it's mentoring or learning support, and the student's not really engaging? What are some practical tips or suggestions that you could give from your wealth of experience to help a volunteer engage with a student who mightn't have the right mindset or not really engaging in a session?
That's a good one. I think the first thing is not to take it personally. I've had many experiences where students have not necessarily wanted to spend time with me for whatever reason, or have taken a while to warm up. So I think the biggest thing can be sometimes just giving them some space. And that might mean that rather than peppering them with lots of questions or, trying multiple different ways to engage them, it might mean that you go for a walk together in the school grounds and you just talk about, whatever's happening in your day, or you just walk quietly together. It might mean that you do an activity quietly together until they're feeling more open to having that conversation and connection with you. So sometimes just having that quiet time, or that giving them that space to sort of move through their own feelings is important. I think knowing their interests and their motivations is key. So if you've got a connection, whether it's football or motorbikes or animals or whatever it is, sometimes using that interest area to start a conversation, or to have some photos or a magazine or something that might hook them in and make them think that you're genuine, you are interested in their interests. And I think motivation, knowing what motivates them, are they a kid who loves competition? So getting out and playing a game of basketball together, or doing a board game, and they're driven by that competition? Or are they driven by praise, or do they love conversation? So getting to know their motivations, and their teachers can help you with that if they're not opening up to let you know those things. The other thing is sharing about yourself. And I know I taught prep for a long time, and they would love hearing stories about my dog or my dad or my neighbour or my house. They're often very curious about your life outside of, the experience in school. So sometimes it could just be you telling a story, and them just having that opportunity to listen and learn more about you. And that makes them feel like you're not just, wanting to know information or wanting things out of them. It's that you're there for a two-way relationship, and you're happy to share your own life with them. And I think, often they're surprised about your own interests or your own stories. Or the other thing is, trying some of those icebreaker activities that I know EdConnect have got a whole bunch of those I think it's on the website. So just those games where you share your favourite colours or animals, and, questions about their favourite story, or sometimes those really simple icebreakers can be just a good place to start for both of you in those sometimes tricky initial conversations.
Thank you so much, Blanche. I'm sure there'll be some other questions that might come your way from the chat box. And I think one of the other things that's also really good to remind all volunteers is it takes time Like the students, it may be their first mentor or their first volunteer that's come into the classroom. So just be patient and don't rush it, and give it time, and it'll fall into place, I think. So thank you, Blanche. Thank you so much for sharing and supporting us in what we do, and your passion for education, but also EdConnect as well. So thank you very much, Blanche.
Thanks.
Okay, finally, I'd like to welcome Reno to our online stage. Reno recently featured in our ABC story, You're Never Too Old to Change Lives. 74-year-old Reno is an EdConnect volunteer at a local Victorian primary school. I can vouch for this. His warm and personable nature assists him to teach lifelong skills and strike up heartwarming friendships that change the lives of the young students. So now we'll play the clip from ABC.
Reno's a very kind man. He helps me when I get upset, and I think it's really sweet that he comes here and he thinks of all of the kids as his grandchildren.
It's something that I maintain that in volunteering you get more than you give.
I think I was in grade 3 and I was walking around and I saw him and he came up to me and we talked. Later that day he introduced me to cameras.
There's a rule in photography which says that the part is more interesting than the whole.
Reno, he's a star. At 73, he's still going strong. When he retired, he was worried he'd end up on the scrap heap, and they're his words, not mine. But then he found EdConnect and he just loves it.
We're not into solving their problems. It's more like helping them along the way. If I had to describe it in one word, I'd say being there. 2 words. Yep.
How to play Guess My Number is like there's a 2-digit number and you got to try to guess the number.
What about a 9?
Yes, there is a 9.
We belong to different worlds, different generations, but the human element tends to actually be a common denominator. It's 7.
No.
2.
He puts other people before himself all the time, and I love him for it. I just love everything about him.
5.
No. Some bad things have happened to him, so I think it's good that he has some kids here to keep him company.
And I met Helen in my teens. We got married at 24. We decided to try our luck to Australia. We had 2 babies straight away. They were beautiful boys. And eventually things got a bit muddied. One day, David was suffering from back pains. He was diagnosed eventually with bone cancer. He survived it for 15 months, but then the inevitable happened. Mark turned out to be a computer whiz. He became a programmer, and then one day we got the news that he was discovered by the police. He had a heart attack. When something like that happens to you, I mean, you either stay in a corner and wait for death, or else you try to share your skills and offer it all for the memory of your sons. We had the discussion because I called him.
My favourite thing to do with Reno is probably taking a walk around and chatting. I feel like we're friends. I feel like we get along really easy.
There's one thing which is certain in life. Many things are uncertain, but one thing that's certain is change. They start actually telling you about their fears, their anxieties. That's where you actually apply your life skills and your experiences to help them see things from a manageable perspective. And the more you struggle against change, the more it's difficult for you to proceed to the next phase of your life.
Yeah.
you sort of prepared them, give them the tools in the hope that you have done something good to make their life better. First number, guess.
1, 2, 1. Yeah!
The impact of the program is phenomenal. The schools, what they tell us, they see the difference in their students. The students grow and they thrive because they've got someone who believes in them, someone who's there for them every week.
Let's have a look at them. These kids that I work with, they fill the gaps. They come and tell you, we're here for you. See how beautiful it is?
Yeah.
When you get closer, you see all the detail? The highlight not only of the volunteering, but also one of the highlights of my experiences, let's put it this way. Is that too? Oh, wow.
Good job, Rena. Yeah.
I hope that it will motivate other people to get out of their little corners and little holes and do something useful. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Go.
I love watching that clip. Reno, thank you for joining us. And just quickly before we do chat with Reno, just a reminder, and I'm looking at the time and we're very close to our hour, so I'm thinking we're going to go a little bit over, so sorry about that. If you need to duck off, then we totally understand. So just any questions that you've got for any of our speakers, please put them in the chat box. Reno, how is it watching yourself back on screen? I must admit, I was like, oh, when you watch yourself, it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit hard sometimes, isn't it? And for all our other speakers as well. Oh, Reno, you're on mute. Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. You always make me blush when you played it. Look, yeah. I love EdConnect. I've been having some thoughts recently, but because I haven't been able to perform my duties with my students, particularly in Hendy Street, Northern Bay College. I have established actually a relationship with quite a few of the students, as you saw in the clip there, and I feel that this pandemic is robbing us of the opportunity to have continuity. But I had a chat to Sally, and she was always very helpful. She's a delightful person.
Yeah, so I guess that it's a great segue with what I wanted to have a chat about, that I guess the support that you receive as an EdConnect volunteer. So yeah, how have you found it?
Definitely very supportive. I mean, we not only have we do have a professional relationship as far as EdConnect is concerned, but sometimes we do open up with about other things anyway, and that is very, very supportive. You know, just as the kids actually have their own issues and that they want to talk about, sometimes I find that Sally is also very good in that respect.
Yeah, and that goes for all of our liaison officers. I know that we hear they all do an amazing job, and we couldn't do the work we do with our volunteers and matching and supporting schools without the great work of our staff. So a big thank you to all our EdConnect staff and especially our liaison officers. Reno, I did see that one of the things that Blanche did suggest of what you could do is walk around the school, is something that we saw in that clip. Is there any other activities that you like to go to? Like I did see the camera as well. Is there anything else that is sort of a go-to activity for you?
Yeah, many activities that are only limited by your imagination, perhaps, and the cooperation of the kids. But one tool that I use actually is when I first start mentoring a kid, is to ask them about their interests, ask them about their hobbies, and that gives me an insight into their personality. That way, after you tell them a little bit about yourself, you give them the opportunity to talk about something that they like and that they love. and it more often than not it works, and they start telling you their own stories, and eventually they trust you so much that they will tell you about what's buried inside them. It's very easy to look at a child and say he or she has ADHD or she is autistic, but how does that make them feel? Why is it is genetic? Is it being caused by some inner feeling? And I find that quite often they do have fears and they do have serious emotional problems. And when they actually ask you to go for a walk with them, and they start telling you what is troubling them, then you feel that you have arrived, and you continue building.
Yeah, I think it's a journey that progresses the whole way through. You continue to learn from each other, and that's what we hear from our volunteers. And what we talk about in training, that it's a two-way street in so many ways, but you learn from them and what's latest music or other things that are going on. So it's always a learning experience for both volunteers and for the students. Reno, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the time, and Jerry has sent through a couple of questions. So we did have a question for Graham Maybury, and I'm not sure if Graeme and Brent are still online. But Graeme, one of the questions that's come through on any thoughts on what stops people taking that final step to volunteer?
Yes, I think in some cases it is just the for some it is the pressures of life. It is just the fact that it's one more thing that they can't fit in. But for far more, I think it's just that lack of confidence, fear of the unknown, whatever you want to call it. It's similar to me to when we learned very quickly on radio that if you say to somebody, there's somewhere you can go for help, almost certainly they won't. But if you can, without in any sense pressuring the person, if you can say, look, if you like, I'll help you make that connection, very often they're grateful. I stress not taking over in any sense. And so maybe for existing volunteers, one of the key things to do, if you sense people are interested, is to help them across that threshold. Because it's often, everyone, I think everyone in this gathering today, we all come into the situation very aware that we may not be able to do it. Do we have the skills? Are we going to be able to be helpful? So even that same thing there, the support in the very early stages of volunteering can be really vital. But I think mostly it's just overcoming that. It's just that step of confidence. And I guess one of the challenges for groups like EdConnect is to make sure that it's very welcoming, it's very non-threatening, and as you do really well, there's lots of support in the early stages.
Thank you. Thanks, Graeme. Jerry, is there any other questions that you would like to highlight? Or I'm looking at the time and knowing that we are a couple of minutes over, so I'll be guided by you.
Danny, I think we've only had a few questions, and one of them was for Graeme and Brent, who've left us, so we've said goodbye to them. And given the time, maybe we save it for another day.
Yeah, sure, no worries. So what I will do is I'm just going to share our final screen. Thank you, a big heartfelt thank you for connecting with us and joining today. We hope you've enjoyed the stories that each of our speakers have shared and found out a little bit more about the work of EdConnect and the true power of connection. Another way you can build your connection with EdConnect is to like us on Facebook and Instagram, and most importantly, engage with us. Give us a like, make a comment, or share a story. We would love to hear your power of connection story and welcome you to share it through your LO, Jerry, myself, or our communications advisor, Rachel, on the email edconnect@edconnect.org.au. We don't keep your volunteering successes to yourself. We want to hear them. We want to celebrate them. And we'd also love a picture of you outside your school with the school sign, a selfie, or get someone to take the photo for you, just to highlight the work that you're doing and what we're doing with EdConnect. We hope you leave today with renewed enthusiasm about our work and are able to continue to spread the word of EdConnect volunteering in schools. You are all making a massive difference and more than you will ever know, and we thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you soon.